Welcome to another episode of Women with Good Chat. I'm here with my good buddy Pam.
Good morning, Amanda.
How are you?
I'm good. Bit of a long weekend. Kind of seeing it here, but that's okay. It's a great weekend, just a bit long.
Well, you look gorgeous as
There
always,
we are.
my beautiful co-host. So today we wanted to talk about, it's kind of a theme we're touching on a little bit about being a little bit more empowered. We discussed standing your ground a while back, and now we wanted to sort of touch on having the courage and the gumption to ask for what you want, for what you need. And it can be a myriad of different things, but we were just sort of chatting about this, and I think it's a really interesting topic.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic, and it's certainly something that I have been aware of throughout my whole life. It's a skill I am very bad at. And I think you and I have discussed this before, that, we share many cultural norms and traditions. And I think for me, the idea of actually asking for things is very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
It is not in my DNA. It's not in my upbringing. And it's been a real hurdle for me, but it's also been a real disadvantage for me.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, no, I do identify, because I find, and we were just talking about this, that even if you're somewhat entitled to something,
Yes.
if you were told that you could have this for free, just go and ask up there and ask for it, it can be uncomfortable. And
Yes.
I don't know exactly what it is in me that even though I'm entitled to this thing,
Yes.
I don't feel I can ask for the thing.
I don't know either. I mean, to me, it is impolite. How's that?
Yes.
That's what, and for me, manners were just what you live by.
Yeah.
Okay. How you were seen in terms of being in this world in a way that was not interfering or imposing on other people was a really, really big part of the moral teachings my parents brought to me. Manners above all. It's funny, I would still, years after working with people, I mean, literally 20 years into a working arrangement with people, I would still, if I had known them first when I was younger, I would call them Mr., call them Professor, like all of that. All of that. When I meet someone, I still would call them Sir. I mean, that sort of thing is very, very, very ingrained in me. And when it comes to asking for things, it just jumps up in front of me and poses a real barrier.
It's funny you mentioned the thing about sir. I have another forum that I work at besides my own business, and I'm dealing with lots of people, 300 to 400 people at a time. And if a gentleman walks up to me, I'll go, "Hello, sir," and they're like, "What?" Who says that anymore?
When I'm working at the food bank, I do the same thing. And I think someone at the food bank asked me the other day if I had a military background. Call people sir. I'm like, no, that was just the way I was taught.
Yeah.
That's if you meet a older gentleman, not even an older gentleman, right? A gentleman you don't know. See, I'm using the term gentleman. Who the hell uses that? Right? But that is what you would start
Some
with.
guy.
That's what you would start with. I also have gotten into the issue because I would continue to call someone Mr. So-and-so. And they would ask me to call them by first name. But for me, it's also a term of distancing. Right? So that familiarity was not always something I wanted to cultivate with people. But anyway, all part of that, it's all part of this, how kind of much space do you occupy?
Yeah.
Is that right? Is that, yeah. So anyway, but specifically asking for what we want.
No, and I totally agree. And so it's something that that I think in our own way we've both been trying to work on a little bit without actually even being conscious of it.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about manners, again, we have very similar upbringing. It's about rudeness. I think that is the thing that I find is what I really struggle with dealing with when I feel that people are rude to me or to someone else.
Yes.
And so manners are kind of a bit part of that, and that's probably what also holds me back in asking for something. It seems kind of gauche or garish.
Yes, exactly.
Does that make sense?
I think that makes absolute sense. And of course, that is nonsense in a lot of ways. And it's particularly nonsense in the society we live in, where obviously people bring to our interactions in Toronto a million different cultures, what is, what isn't, how you deal with people, how you deal with strangers, the space you give them physically, the space you give them verbally. And so it is a problem because I think, unfortunately, along with my behaviors come judgments, which are not appropriate. Just because other people don't smile when you meet them, that's maybe nothing. If other people are particularly familiar and you find that difficult, it may in fact be not really saying anything other than that's where their traditions are, what they were taught. So I think it's a bit of a double-edged sword. You got to be careful you're not bringing those judgments forward into play. I mean, if it's with my family, that doesn't go. You've been, we have rules and you don't get to be like that. But carrying all of that into as multicultural society of ours, I think is a problem.
And that's actually a really interesting point, because there are so many different cultures in the city. I think we are still deemed the most multicultural city in the world.
Yes.
And but it's hard to know what is acceptable and what isn't.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think as long as you're gracious and, well, obviously you have to be accepting, because they have to be accepting of you.
Yes.
But you're not going to know all the appropriate things.
No,
but just try and approach things with grace. And generally you're A-okay.
You're A-okay. Absolutely. Yep.
I'd love for you to touch on what we were just talking about with your coffee passport.
So one of this has been, as I'm saying, something that I became conscious of when I was sitting on boards in the nonprofit sector. My inability to ask people for donations was a huge problem of mine. Cost me a lot of money, because instead of going out and getting donations, I would just fork up the money. Right? We've talked about that. So it's something that I know has been an issue for me. And that was an issue even when I really believed in my charities. It didn't reflect whether I thought my charities were legitimate. I knew the finances. I knew the money was going to the right place. Still, this inability to ask. So this is something I actually set for myself as a task, to try to walk outside of my comfort zone to ask for things. And the kind of weird, as everybody knows who's listening to the podcast, I am a bit of a fanatic about my coffee. And recently I bought a coffee passport. It's a Toronto coffee passport, which just lists a whole bunch of independent coffee shops in the Toronto area. And I've been trying to go to them and support local coffee people.
Lovely.
And what I've been giving myself the goal of is walking in, telling them I'm here because of the passport, and also asking them whether, because I'm here with the passport, are they, giving anything away? Are they giving a free cup of coffee? Are they giving me a discount? Are they willing to, stamp my passport so that if I come in 5 times? And it is very uncomfortable for me. It's real, and this is silly, right? I'm just walking in and saying, look, I'm here because of this program. Are you doing anything with the program? But it has been hard, but it's getting easier.
Yeah,
right.
And I, when you were telling me this story a few moments ago, I'm like, but they're in the book, and it says, here's a discount.
Exactly.
So I found that very confusing.
Exactly, and I think that is a key part of what is happening with this, which is sometimes I go in and say that, and the baristas, I'm usually talking to barista, are thrilled. Oh my God, that's so neat. No one told us that. Can I see the passport? Like, this is a great program. Let me look through. And then they ask me if other coffee shops they like are in it. Other people are just rude, right? They're just like, I don't know what that is. I don't know why we're in there, right? Like, just order your coffee and get out. So also the difference in the response to me has been very, there's been huge differences in response, but that's good, because that's what I've got. If every time I went in, I got this massive positive response, this would not be something that was pushing me. Right. But because there's the diversity of the response, I'm still having to do it. Now, I asked you when we were thinking about talking about the passport, I thought, is this banal? Right? I said, is this an unimportant thing we're talking about, when obviously asking for what we want is a really important thing and goes deep.
But this is a real life experience, which is why when you told me about it, I'm like, I want to talk about this, because it's something that's actually happened, and you've had rejection, and you've still gone back and said, hey, here's my passport. And, I know it sounds like a small thing, but it's these little things that do push you out of your comfort zone.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
And
right.
I think they're important.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, have you found you've had experiences where you've been reluctant to ask for things when, yeah.
Yes. I mean, we were just talking about, certain things where you're entitled to something for free, but you still feel weird about approaching.
Yeah, absolutely.
One area that I'm particularly sensitive about is the service industry. And of course, being in culinary, it's when I have experience in a restaurant, I am careful not to be judgy because I understand what tough a job it is to serve and to run a restaurant and everything else. But if I feel that I'm not being looked after, and I don't mean being catered to, I mean, and we were just talking about this, you walk in and there's no sense of what's going on or what you're supposed to do. I really dislike that intensely. But I find that I can let a lot of things go. But, and as I always say, I don't mind if the food is a 7 out of 10. I want to have a great experience because I'm not making that thing.
Right.
So if I'm not having a good experience, I will write a letter.
Yeah.
I'll send an email, and again, it's nothing rude, but I will say X, Y, Z, and that is kind of my way of asking for what I want. It's getting my point across.
Right. And I think the other thing that developing this skill is doing is preventing the buildup of resentment which comes when you don't do it. So, I mean, we could do another episode on this in a deeper situation, like in our relationships. Are we asking for what we need in our relationships? Or are we just expecting people to know what we need, offer it to us? And when that doesn't happen, does that lead to a buildup of resentment, right?
Exactly.
Which is what could happen if your needs are not being met because you're not being forward enough about what they are, or clear enough about what they are.
Exactly. And again, as women, I think this can happen to everybody, obviously, but we're two women talking about things that affect us. And you can get the little buildup of all the little things that you don't ask for. And this is a classic, whatever type of relationship you have, this is a classic thing that happens in relationships where our needs aren't being met because we're not asking.
We're not asking.
And you know, when you have two people that process things differently, you're not going to look at he never brings me flowers.
Yeah,
Does he know you want flowers?
Yes.
And what do the flowers mean? Well, they mean a lot of different things. Well,
Right.
they might not know that. So.
Exactly. No, exactly. Absolutely. So this skill, I've talked about it in, the work with my charities when I should have been more aggressive about asking for donations, but also it's a very important skill in relationships. And it's just, it gets it off your chest, right? You don't want that stuff niggling you when in fact, there's no reason for it to, and you actually don't know that the other person is not being receptive, right? It's getting it on the table, it's doing it, and I think it's a really good skill. I think it's a really important skill.
It is, and it's something you can work on like everything else. And it's important to value yourself, make sure your needs are being met, and to find a way to communicate these things while still keeping grace, being gracious, and asking politely. And hoping now, if you don't get what you want, maybe you can yell a little bit, but
well, you'll know the person saying no. You'll know they're saying no, and then all the
but
the consequences.
At least to take the risk to ask for what you want, to ask for what you need, and be a little bit brave every once in a while. Well, I think this was a great episode. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wise words as always. And please drop comments below.
Absolutely.
We want to know what you think and want to know what your experiences are when you ask for what you want.
Absolutely.
We look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Women with Good Chat.
Chat soon.
Bye.